Hello, hello. Welcome. Well, it looks like my internet is a little wobbly, and so I'm slowing down to catch up. A little bit late joining in today for the live because I've got a sick one at home. Poor little guy turned 10 on Friday and had to miss school today because he's sick. But hope you're doing well and hope you are healthy and your household is healthy and your class is healthy, and we are just riding the wave to the end of the school year. For some of us, that is next week. For others of us, that is next month. But wherever you are, I hope you are doing well. Over the weekend, I came across a strategy, the first strategy, in terms of thinking about claims from data or research, investigations, things like that. This is hugely important as we are sort of bombarded and surrounded by people making evidence-based claims or data-based claims. And very often those do have data behind them. So like step one is sort of figuring out like, where do things come from? And this first strategy I thought was really interesting. So it's an acronym. F stands for funding. Who funded the research? Not all, let me rephrase that. It is always good to know who funded it. Who funded it does not necessarily mean it's biased, right? So like it's just one, the first letter in the acronym is funding, but knowing who funded the research can be really helpful. The I is the investigation. What are some details? So especially in our science classrooms, as we're thinking about planning and carrying out investigations, this is a great way to lean into that skill, both in our science classrooms, but in our social studies and in our math classrooms when we're exploring claims that people are making from data or that they purport are being made from data. Who is in the study? Was it a correlation? Was it a causation study? These are really different. Were they just looking for connections? Were they having a treatment and a control and looking at the outcome based on the treatment versus based on the control? That latter being the causation, what we need for causation when we're actually exploring and working through the mechanisms. Wow, my internet's really wobbly today. The first one, when we're just looking at a bunch of data and we're getting people to self-report and looking for connections and relationships, then we're in the correlation camp and sort of how they actually design the study. How does that relate to what they are saying? So F is for funding, I is for investigation, and then the R is for results. Like, what did they actually find? What did the original researchers find? How did they talk about their study? How did they talk about their certainty or their uncertainty in their outcome being the be all end all, or in their outcome being something they could extrapolate out to what population or what component of the population? As in, how did the original researchers talk about their results as it relates to how they designed their investigation? The S stands for subjects, or as I like to say, sample. Who is your sample? What sample were they using in this? And sample oftentimes is people we can relate to, like, oh, well, if there's a study of 20, 60-year-old men, I'm not really certain that's going to like relate to me as a female in my 40s. But, you know, there could be connections, there could be similarities, but there also could be real differences. So it's easy to think about sample when we think about that, or even better, if you go out and you conduct a survey at your school and you only ask the 6th grade boys what they want, then that might not actually apply to the entire middle school. Kids can really wrap their heads around that one in terms of the sample or the subjects. But also remembering it comes to any time we're doing an investigation. What is the sample? How representative is that sample for us? And then in this first acronym, so funding, investigation, results, subjects, or sample, the T is for time. And in this strategy, they were suggesting, like, how long did the study run for? How much data did they collect? Was it a one point in time? Was it one point in time, but across many months or weeks or years? Or was it across, you know, what is the time frame and how is that relevant to the question is really what I am going for. So this is a really interesting acronym that we can use as we're having our students think about claims that they are receiving that others are making from data. So like taking that claim, going back to the original, researchers, folks who presented out on the research, and using this acronym of FIRST to do an initial pass to sort of bring that critical lens, right? We want to instill healthy skepticism in our learners as they are absorbing and taking in and learning from claims that others are making from data. We do not want them to be like super skeptical and actually so skeptical that they become cynical of everything anybody tells them as it comes from data. But we also don't want them to just be passively naive and accept everything as total truth as it is presented as a claim. This is both important for them in terms of 21st century skills existing in this data-driven society, and super critical skill for them to develop that helps with their own identification of drawing conclusions, synthesizing data, making a claim, building out their claims evidence reasoning from data. And all of this relates to how do we help our students think statistically about data? All of those pieces, the funding, the investigation design, the results, the subjects, the sample, the time, all of these are different components of how we bring the statistical mindset to our work with data. And that is something that every single student can work on and build out their skill sets on. So a lot of us tend to think that statistics is something that we teach in a math class, and especially we teach for our older students in math class. But I just want to point out, like, that is not the case. All of our students, including our very littles, kindergartners, pre-Kers, can be thinking statistically about data. And just want to give the shout out of this like pitch that we put out there a little while ago in one of our Data Literacy 101 articles for NSTA Science Scope of why we should all embrace statistical thinking, where I talk through like what actually is statistical thinking. It is this mindset of how we make sense of things, how we think about data, how we think probabilistically, not black, white, but think of like, what can we say from the evidence? How certain can we be? How confident are we in that what we are seeing is actually telling us something about the phenomenon that we are exploring, things like that. This is something, as I said, all of our students can do. Not how do we calculate a statistic like an ANOVA or even a mode or an average or a mean from our data, but how do we think about what mindset do we use? And in this article, we talk through various different ways that we can think about integrating that in to anything we are doing. So, way number one, think about your sample. Way number two, talk about your uncertainty, those results. How are you talking about those results? Number three, we support with evidence. We don't prove a hypothesis. We're always looking to support. So again, like, how does that relate to the result? And what influences that is what our investigation is and the time that we used and things like that. I love this number four. We can make claims from the data we have, not what we want to have. This is critical for helping our students think about and build their data literacy as they are going through, and more broadly, this statistical lens, the statistical thinking that we can bring in. Notice none of those or any of the other ways that we talk about in the article has anything to do with calculating numbers. It's just how we think about things. And this is a critical key piece for helping our students build this foundational stance that they can come from in terms of how to think statistically themselves when they are working with data and as they are absorbing claims that others are putting out there from data. So we can use this in our own teaching, in our own classroom, in our own lessons that have to do with data. We can use this by reading headlines or reading claims that others are making from data, but this is crucial to give our students this to set them up for success in the 21st century. And maybe they can share with some adults in their household because us adults aren't always so great at thinking statistically on things. So I'll put a link to that article, that Data Literacy 101 article of why we should all embrace statistical thinking in case you want to look more in depth as to what some of those ways were that I was talking about and how to integrate that into your teaching. Until next week, I hope you are doing well, that you're staying sane, you're staying healthy. Thank you for all that you do. Keep exploring, stay curious, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.